This class lecture is going to be over 4 terms that are essential to this week's assignment, as well as that were featured in the reading for this week. And those 4 terms are goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics. They're not terms that are limited to social media. They're broad marketing terms, but they are essential to understanding what's expected of you from this week's assignment. On that note, I am sending you an email about how we can ask questions with Georgina, who runs Week2Lecture. She really wants to interact face-to-face with some people, so she'd like to do a Google Hangout. So I'm going to be sending you an email that asks you what are some good times that might happen. You don't have to do the Google Hangout. I know some of you work, so it might not work out. But be sure and take a look at that email, because it's also going to ask you if you have questions for her that we can pass on, etc. However, I think it's essential that you know these 4 terms before we can kind of move forward. Hopefully on your first assignment, you got to know the client better, you got to think about audiences and things like that. And the second assignment, we're going to look at, again, goals, objectives, strategies, and tactics. And it's very important for you to understand these 4 words in order to build a successful social media campaign. Okay? Now, in this class for the summer, you guys are kind of lucky in the sense that Week2Lecture has already given us the goal that they want us to work on. The goal is an overarching plan, if you will, or a goal. We all know what goals are, but it's something that the company is reaching for. Sometimes it's a large goal. For example, Week2Lecture's overall goal is to reunite families, okay, to be there for children. However, sometimes we have a goal for a particular campaign, okay? So for this campaign, it's about feeding the children, okay, which you'll see when you read the assignment sheet. So the goal for that is to feed the children. That's an overarching goal for the campaign. Also part of that campaign goal is the idea that they want to reach current donors and make them loyal and give more, as well as reach new donors. Okay, so we're looking at existing donors, loyalty, new donors, awareness. Okay, so awareness and loyalty are the goals that we have for this campaign. They're very broad. Okay, so that's what a goal is. The next one is objectives, and objectives are very strategic. They're specific, and they are measurable, okay? So in fact, one of the things that you're going to learn is a term called SMART, okay? You'll either have read it in your readings or you're going to see it in other readings that we have. And SMART refers to that the objectives are specific, okay? So you want to be very, very specific. We're not just trying to reach donors. That's not specific enough. It needs to be measurable. How many donors? Usually it's done in a percentage. You could do it by a number, you know, we want to increase it by 100, or we want to increase it by 10%, something like that. It needs to be measurable. The A stands for attainable. It needs to be realistic in the sense of this is something we can actually attain. You don't want to increase donors by 50% if it's taken years to build what they have now, okay? R is that it's relevant to the campaign, okay? We don't want an objective to make people aware of the services necessarily when our objective or the goal for this campaign is donors, okay? It may play a small part of it, but it's not relevant to the current campaign. And then the last T, the T in SMART stands for time related, meaning you have to have some sort of time limit, some sort of deadline for your objective, okay? So you get to build your own objectives. So I'm just going to give you an example. For example, if our goal is to raise awareness and loyalty among our donors, one of the objectives might be to increase second giving, if you will, like people who gave once and we want them to give a second time. Increase second givers by 10% in a 3-month period, okay? I believe Week2Lecture says these campaigns tend to run for 6 months, so that could be your. But the specific is that it's talking about one particular thing. So second givers, okay? It could be that you decide you're going to focus on people who, you know, give monthly, give really regularly, and we want to increase the number of those people, That's perfectly fine too. Or you could say, well, not the example I'm using here, people who gave once, we want them to give again. Okay. So I call them second givers. You can call them what you want. Very specific, measurable, percentage, number. Attainable, a 10%, 5%. This is a question that you can ask Georgina, the director, is what does she think is an attainable goal? She might say 15 is attainable because they've done it in the past. So something to think about. And then relevant, it's very relevant because we're talking about donors specific to this campaign. And then the last one, time. I gave it a time period, 3 months, 6 months, whatever the case may be. That's, again, ties to attainable. Can you attain that sort of objective in that period of time? Okay, so that's what we mean by SMART objective. Okay, you do need to write objectives. The goal is given to us, awareness and loyalty, but the objectives are up to you. And those are questions you might need to ask Georgina as far as what does she think is attainable and what about a time limit and that kind of thing. Then the next step are strategies. Okay, and the strategies have more to do with an approach, a feeling, an emotion. What kind of messages can we develop that will get people to give money? And sometimes we have to use our own experiences. For example, you're poor college kids. What would get you to donate money to a cause? Okay, it doesn't have to be a lot. You don't have to think of that. But what would get you? What gets you to give money? It might be testimonials from people. It might be examples of things that have worked. Now, those are, when we actually write them down and put them in social media, they're called tactics because they're tools. Strategies is, again, more about a feeling or something like that. Okay, so sorry, got interrupted by the phone. So we're talking about strategies and how they're more about an approach that we take to get people to do our objective. Okay, a lot of times, and I mentioned, what can we think of that will get people to give money? A lot of times, the messages we develop have a couple of strategies. One might be emotional, one might be logical. For example, I talked about, the reason we give might be because we hear a story from them, a testimonial, okay, or we see examples of their work. That is an emotional strategy to getting people to give money. Okay, some people are reached in that way, and that's why knowing who your audience is important. People who, maybe it's families or philanthropic kind of individuals, they might be more moved by an emotional approach. Okay, another approach might be logical. A logical strategy is if you can show that the money they're giving is tax deductible, or that it saves the government money in the long run, or something like that, it's that it's given in an efficient way. They have low overhead of Pomojaleo, whatever the case may be. That's taking a logical approach. That if you give money, it's effective, it's efficient, it saves money in the long run, that kind of stuff. That's a logical approach, emotional logical. Some other strategies that people could use in different ones are fear. Fear is a strategy you have to be very, very careful with, though. It only works in certain situations. Making people scared, showing sad little kids or something like that might work emotional, but showing scared little kids does not improve people's wanting to give. They just, don't respect you anymore and they don't like you playing with their emotions. Fear, though, might be a strategy that works well in health campaigns. Quit smoking ads, those kinds of things. They often use a fear approach. A bandwagon approach is a strategy. Everybody else is doing it, so why don't you do it? Okay. So those are just some strategies that you can use. They're more, like I said, they're not specific. They're not tied necessarily to just one thing or another, but they're more about reaching the audience that you want to reach and getting them motivation, if you will. What is the motivation to get people to reach your objectives? Okay. And then the last one here is tactics. And tactics are our tools. And this is where social media comes in. Okay, notice that nowhere here have we talked about social media until now. Having a Facebook page is never a goal. Okay, you can have specific measurable social media objectives, like we want to increase engagement, we want to increase the number of people clicking on our site, those kinds of things. They're not usually business objectives because it doesn't matter if they click on our site. We want them to buy something or they want to give something. Okay, so social media really for our goal, for our campaign here, they don't come in until the very end down here. Okay, and the tactics are how are we going to reach our audience? Okay, with our strategy. If our strategy is emotional, okay, let's use the emotional approach. Say we're looking for individuals or families or philanthropic churches, those kinds of things. And we decided to take an emotional approach. What tactics are we going to use to give them? What's the best way to show a testimonial? Okay, video. Okay, so one tactic we might have is to create a YouTube channel and have YouTube videos that show, our money at work. Tells the story of some young child at this orphanage, okay, or this center. That is a tactic. Writing a message that appears on a YouTube channel, that's a tactic, okay? Creating the channel is just a side thing if they don't have it already. But the tactic is creating videos that we're going to put on YouTube. Now, we can't just leave them on YouTube because not everybody's going to find them. We can then promote them through a Facebook page, or we could create a blog post that has a video in it and share that in different things. For your writing assignment next week, week 3, we're going to do content. You actually do have to write a blog or create a blog. You could do a video if you wanted to, that for your piece. So that's your tactic. Developing a video to put on YouTube, writing a blog post, having Friday messages of some sort with a hashtag or something like that. Those are all tactics. You don't have any social media till you get down to tactics. Okay. Now at the end, when we measure and monitor and that kind of stuff, yes, you might have some social media objectives. Okay? Our main goal is going to be, our main objective is going to be increasing second givers by 10% in 3-month period. Okay, whatever objective you come up with. You can have objectives that you measure, for example, that we want to increase engagement by 10%. Okay, and if you remember what engagement is, okay, remember engagement is anytime they interact with our message. It might be a like, might be a comment, might be a share. Okay, all of those ways are we engage. Now, why is engagement important? Because it can spread our message if they share it. Okay, people who engage with a brand have found to be much more likely to buy from that brand. Okay, in this case, we want them to give to our brand in the case of donations, making people interact. Okay, so those are objectives that you can have, and I'll even let you write them as one of your objectives, but you do need to have objectives that are tied directly to this fundraising campaign. Okay, so anyway, talking about tactics, that's where our social media is. Now, when you do your YouTube video or you do your social media post, your blog post, or whatever the case may be, and you write up your Facebook post or your Instagram post or whatever the case may be, we also have to include in there ways to measure. Because if you remember on our objectives, measuring is the second letter. Okay, M stands for measure. So in order to measure the effectiveness of our social media, we need to include in there some way to find, to see if it got shared, if it got commented, whatever. Hashtags are a common way to include measurability in a social media post, okay? Because then all Georgina has to do is click on that hashtag and it will bring up everything that's there, okay? You could include coupon codes or something like that. If they use this number and we'll double, we'll get somebody to double it or something like that. That might be a way to get corporate donors, if we'll make you part of a campaign where if you give, will you match the donations of some other givers or something like that? Well, if they do that, then we want to make sure we have some sort of hashtag, some sort of code, some way for the donor, for the Georgina or whoever's, monitoring the campaign to figure out where our social media is and if it worked. Now, in the big picture, when you're working at a corporation or something like that, you can create language in the code that lets people know that they came from here to there. And we're going to talk more about that when we get to media measuring and monitoring. But there's codes that you can put in your social media and in your website so they can know where this traffic is coming from. But, these are a nonprofit. They don't have a lot of money. Let's make it easy for them. So you need to create hashtags. You need to create codes, some way for them to be able to track your messages. Okay. So our goal has been set for us. It's to raise awareness and to create loyalty. So we have a couple of goals. You need to write a couple of objectives for those. Okay. At least one of your objectives must be directly related to that goal. I will allow an objective as far as social media goes, as long as you can explain why that goal is important. Why that objective is important to your goal, and that you do SMART. So that is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Okay. but at least one of your objectives has to be tied directly to that goal of loyalty or awareness. Then you need to come up with a strategy. It's just a paragraph telling me what kind of approach are you going to take to get people to give, and then a list of tactics. And that's shown there as well in assignment that we'll take a look at now. Okay, so your assignment for this next week, we'll be due next Monday, part 2 is goals and objectives. And again, if you watch the video that I just showed you, I talked about each of those specific terms. I started out our assignment here with the statement from the client about the campaign goal, which is Feed the Babies campaign. You can see that Pamoja Leo regularly receives referrals to help moms, grandmas, aunties, and fathers feed babies birth to 6 months. Inability to feed a new baby is one of the most common reasons children are separated from their families. Reasons behind the inability to feed babies can range from death of the mother, HIV plus status, or mental health. When these referrals are received, we often do a social media fundraising campaign to generate funds to feed these little ones for 6 months. Our donors are typically fairly responsive to these campaigns. Next, we need to move donors who contribute once, who move from awareness to engagement, into the loyalty phase of the donor journey. This involves thanking the one-time donors for their participation, showing the impact of their involvement, encouraging them to move into the monthly donor category. Please note that these campaigns will run concurrently with other campaigns on an as-needed basis. Okay, so that's one reason we had them ask them to give us a campaign like this for the summer. It's because it's going to be information given individually by each of you, and that way they can just sort of use it as they need it. So for this particular campaign, as I mentioned, we're looking at the donor phase of awareness and loyalty. The goal is to create awareness for new donors and to promote loyalty among existing donors. Okay, now here's where you come in. What objectives do you have to reach your goal? Okay, I want you to write at least 2 objectives. Okay, remember that they need to be SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-oriented. Okay, and there's the example to give you there. So you need to write at least 2 objectives. I will put that in there. I don't think I have that marked. Okay, then you need at least 2 strategies for engaging those new donors and for moving existing donors. Okay, how will you get them to contribute for the first time? How do you get them to contribute again? What emotions or logical arguments can you use? You can also use bandwagon. You know, if you're showing that, if you remember from the persuasion video and the idea of consistency and the idea of other people are doing it, I should do it, that kind of stuff. And then finally, what social media messages will you develop? You don't have to, at this point, you don't have to write long posts or anything like that, but maybe just come up with some themes, 5 to 6, 7, 8 different little kind of topics that you would be writing your social media messages and activities that would hopefully reach those objectives. Okay, so again, this is due the 24th, which is next Monday. So take a look there at the second assignment, part 2, goals and objectives. Part 1 is due tonight. Okay, I've received some, and I'll start taking a look at those. I'm kind of giving everybody an extra day on the discussion as well, since some people are having trouble getting connected. But campaign plan, part 2, goals and objectives. Take a look at the video, this video. Be sure to read the email that I'll be sending you out shortly, and be sure to ask me any questions as soon as you can think of them, so that you won't have any trouble working on this this assignment. Okay, thanks.